What to do when the step-grandparents do not include my kids as their grandchildren.
Their actions are going to be a result of what you tell them and what you expect from them. And understanding that, hey, if you're going to treat them different, then your access, your availability to make them feel not included is going to be limited or gone.
Just even allowing there to be space for the step-grandparents to express like, hey, this is unnatural for me and I don't know what I'm doing, and I don't know how I'm feeling about this.
Blended families are not forged overnight. They're forged through patience and empathy and understanding and conversation and just the willingness to stay in that season and continue. And if you're listening to this, you're committed to that path.
Your blended family has a 100% chance of success when you do it God's way. We're Blended Kingdom Families, and we want to provide biblical resources to heal and restore families with a message of hope for the next generation.
Hey guys, welcome back to the BKF podcast. We are excited to be with you today and bringing a topic that was actually addressed to us.
Yeah, it was a question. Yes, so we always, sometimes on our stories, on our social media, we'll ask, what are some topics that you would like for us to address on the podcast? We've done a previous podcast on step-grandparents and their role in your children's lives. So the question is, what to do when the step-grandparents do not include my kids as their grandchildren?
I heard this and I was like, there's some things about blended families that just give me the ick. And I'm like, that gives me the ick. But I want to address this from a perspective of, hey, not everybody's going to fall in line the way we think.
Sure.
And grandparents, step-grandparents, people have expectations. And maybe your first marriage was an expectation of theirs and they're disappointed in the result, or they're disappointed that they have, to live in that scenario where they are not the biological grandparents, but expected to. So I want to approach it with a little bit of empathy, but hopefully from a perspective of let's open up a conversation, because I do think this distreatment, meaning you're treating people differently, can be very evident in certain situations. We've heard of, Christmases where, the grandparents bring over presents for all their grandchildren except their other
the bonus grandchildren.
Exactly. So there's no presents for them to open. And I think that can be very hurtful to people, and it can be very hurtful for your own marriage.
Well, and I think it's very natural to feel hurt or rejected when step-grandparents don't include your kids as their grandchildren. These feelings are very valid. So let's put some air back in the room with that. We totally understand that. And I think many blended families, like you said, Scott, go through this challenge. So I think it's good for us to probably understand some root causes as to why maybe the grandparents might do this, or like why those behaviors are being displayed. And I think a lot of it can be adjusting to new roles. Like they may not just understand, you guys, like where their role is in your kid's life, meaning you're the new spouse, these are their step-grandchildren. So they may not fully understand their new role in your child's life, especially in in the relationship dynamic. And so I think that's where, we'll implement some strategies, but, having open and honest conversations about that ahead of time and kind of like what maybe, I don't know if the word is expectations, but hey, like, we're getting married. This is a remarriage. We're all navigating this for the first time together. Let's think of some things that we can implement that would be good for all of the children.
Well, and there's no bond that's there.
Sure.
So let's understand that, bonds are created, and the result of a great bonding process is an emotional connection that splinters into all areas of enjoyment of that relationship. Step-grandparents may not have bonds with those children.
Yeah.
So, and as you said, they may not even know how to act or how to react. We've talked about this a lot. Grandparents or your parents go through a lot of trauma and divorce as well. And that's very difficult for them. And as they've related to these new children in your marriage, they're not bonded together. So in a previous episode, we talked about, intentional bonding with, the different blended children. That also includes grandparents.
Yeah.
Create opportunities for them to bond, for them to understand who these children are and how they connect in their lives, and make that relationship flourish.
Yeah, I think too, I mean, it is likely in that you may experience loyalty conflicts. So the step grandparents may feel loyalty to their biological grandchildren and feel conflicted about that with the new bonus grandchildren. And so, I would just say, again, going back to conversation and just even allowing there to be space for the step grandparents to express like, hey, this is unnatural for me. And I don't know what I'm doing. And I don't know how I'm feeling about this, or that I'm feeling, weird about this, or, it's not feeling natural, whatever the language is.
Yeah.
But just allowing there to be conversation about that without judging them, criticizing them, or becoming defensive. Because again, they may be doing this for the first time as well, with blending families, and they don't know how to navigate it. So I think always approaching it with grace and patience and understanding. But I also understand too that, there's the flip side of this where there are step grandparents who, there have been conversations and there have been discussions, and they still choose to treat differently. And we're going to get into that.
Well, about 40% of step families experience some type of difficulty in relationship in step parenting and grandparenting. So if you're in this boat, you're not alone. This is something that is more common than you think. And I love that you said, hey, we've had conversations and it's still different. And this is where you can get a little bit on the rocky edge here, but I'm going to say this anyway. Their actions are going to be a result of what you tell them and what you expect from them. But your priority before you get to the step grandparenting is your family.
Right.
And understanding that, hey, if you're going to treat them different, then your access, your availability to make them feel not included is going to be limited or gone. Because, again, you're responsible for your kiddos. And if that is a dividing thing that cannot be solved, then it can be eliminated. Because, again, you're not, in essence, joining their family. You are creating your own family. And within that family, there needs to be rules. There needs to be norms and boundaries and expectations that you put that don't need to be stepped on by a grandparent that doesn't respect your house.
Yeah. So, we have on here open dialogue, having respectful and open conversations with the step grandparents about this. Express how you and your children feel about it, of the lack of inclusion, and give them the opportunity to share their perspective.
Let me also say this too. I see a lot of people who come to this problem and say, my spouse tells me about a problem, but I don't want to acknowledge it.
Yeah.
So if they're your parents that are treating her kids differently, you need to be responsible enough to have a conversation, because you may see it and go, well, I don't want to make waves, or I understand X, Y, Z. I still want my kids to see them.
Yeah.
All these things, but by doing this, you're telling them it's okay for you to treat her kids differently.
Yeah.
It's okay for you to do that. And that's not okay. You need to listen to your spouse, and if they have a problem with the way that your parents are treating their kids, that becomes y'all's collective issue.
Yes. And the next thing I was going to say is set clear expectations. Be clear about what inclusion looks like for you and your kids and your bonus kids. This might include calling your kids grandchildren or involving them in, different family activities. So set those expectations, so to speak, and let them know, like, hey, this is what we desire. We can't make someone say or do something. However, we can express our desire. We can express our concern for those things, and, share positive experiences. When the relationships between your children and their step grandparents improves, highlight and celebrate those moments to reinforce positive behavior. So be sure to celebrate the wins when you do have those.
Yeah. And equitable treatment, I see a lot of this at in the holiday times, and those conversations can be as simple as, hey, if you're going to come bring presents, make sure that you bring presents for every child, that you're not being unfair or unequitable to your biological children versus your step grandchildren.
Yeah.
And those are just things that you need to just be clear about, set those clear expectations. But I also think, again, kind of putting air back in the room to their scenario, is they haven't created bonding yet. So create opportunities, family activities for them to bond, create opportunities for them to connect, whether that is, picnics, family outings, vacations together, or doing something that drives that conversation. I also want to put one more thing out that can just be knowledgeable is, remember, grandparents are also dealing with your ex-spouse too. So they're dealing with conflicts as it relates to, maybe who you were married to before and that fidelity to that person.
Yeah.
So they're navigating all this together. Yeah. And so create opportunities for them to bond.
Yeah. No, I think that's great. And, you've got to set boundaries and protect your kids, you guys. You got to protect their emotional well-being and their emotional health. And, I think when situations like this can become toxic or harmful, I think it's necessary to set those clear boundaries, and because you have to protect your kids, and sometimes you have to take a step back to reevaluate the health of the relationship and where you're at this time, and again, just be open to active listening of what everyone is feeling and experiencing. We talk about don't forcing relationships with the bonus parent and the bonus kids, but I think it goes the same too for step grandparents. It's like, hey, we want this to happen naturally, and the kids could be feeling a little weird. The bonus grandparents could be feeling weird. So again, just giving that grace and allowing time and allowing the opportunities. Now, that's a different story if the grandparents aren't, taking those opportunities or wanting to spend that time. And that's where, when the problem continues to persist, we're big advocates of counseling. You guys know this if you've been listening to us for a long time. Family counseling can be a great tool that you can use, and, supporting your spouse. I'm so glad that you spoke on that earlier, Scott, because, your spouse needs to be involved in the conversation, and needs to be that support for you if you are feeling like, hey, my kids are not benefiting from this relationship. They're actually being hurt by this relationship. And you and your spouse have to come together and navigate that, and, decide what you're willing to tolerate and not tolerate for your family.
Well, and you mentioned not forcing relationships, and the thought that came to my mind is, I think grandchildren interact with grandparents different ways. And I think when step grandchildren are introduced, I think there's an expectation that they interact in the same manner. Yeah. So like, hey, we call this person Gigi. When Gigi comes over, Gigi gives us all hugs and kisses. Well, the step, child may not feel that connection and may feel extraordinarily awkward about calling them Gigi, or, giving them hugs or kisses, or, go sit in Papa's lap, or, do this. And all of a sudden that child is going, okay, this is not my comfort level with this person. Right. I understand it's maybe your experience, and it probably is their expectation. Yeah. But if we force that, it becomes very, very toxic to building long-term relationships. Most grandparents, and the grandparents who are watching, most grandparents choose their grandparent name, or it's kind of like
the firstborn chooses it.
Yeah. Or it's kind of like the word that they say in that moment. They're like, oh, it's a Mimi or a Gigi or whatever that is. So it's a very natural thing for that to happen. But when the step grandchildren are introduced, they may call you Barbara or Susan, or who knows. But again, expectations are the thief of joy. And if you set those expectations and force those relationships, you're going to find a very much a more difficult road to bonding. Yeah.
And that's why I said, like, the word desire. I think, sometimes expectation can be used, people see it as a negative thing. It can be used in a positive way also. But I think it's just your desire. Like, hey, our family's desire is, like, we want all the kids to feel included. We want the grandparents to be a part of their lives and involved. We want the kids to feel comfortable. We want you to feel comfortable. Like, this is our desire. And, it's great when everyone's on the same page and that works out. And it can be really hard when it's not. And so my prayer is that hopefully this episode has helped in some way and spoken to some of those areas, of where maybe you need to draw those boundaries, and where maybe your spouse needs to pick up the slack more and be more supportive and be more of a vocal voice. If you're feeling like your kids are being left out, so to speak.
Yeah. I know this is an issue that everybody deals with at some point. I'm thinking back to when we first got married, and my mother and we had a comment about my mother was a very special person, and she had a lot of boundary issues, and she was she was interesting. I think she gave Michael the wrong name many times, and
Singletary.
Yeah.
Singletary.
She was a product of the 80s and loved the Bears. But empathy is key in this. Not everybody's going to react the same way. Blended families are not forged overnight. They're forged through patience and empathy and understanding and conversation and just the willingness to stay in that season and continue. And if you're listening to this, you're committed to that path. And hopefully this has encouraged you or opened up some conversations with you and your spouse. Guys, can't wait to see you again next week. Before we go, make sure that you take a moment. We'd love for you to leave a podcast review for us or submit your questions or tell us your thoughts on this episode. We'd love to hear from you.
Yes, absolutely. And if you're in need of coaching, guys, if you're in need of help with your step family, with anything that's going on, relationships, co-parenting, anything. We have blended family coaches who are ready and available to spend time with you and help walk with you through those areas of your life. So be sure to check that out on the website as well.
Thanks so much. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.
Be blessed in all that you do.
Hey friends, so glad you were here with us today, and I hope you enjoyed today's episode. You can find more resources from Blended Kingdom Families at blendedkingdomfamilies.com. Join us again next time as we talk about more blended family topics. Be blessed in all that you do, and remember, nothing will be impossible with God.